a phrase in the Sevenfold Puja, which is one of the most common rituals that we use, that you'll hear on any festival, and sometimes at Sangha Night. There's a phrase that always slightly chills me. And in it, we're asking the Buddhas, to teach the Dharma so that life in this world does not grow dark. So that life in this world does not grow dark. And I find that a chilling phrase, because life in this world could be very dark indeed. In fact, life in this world is very dark for quite a lot of people. We've seen what happens when people in positions of power lose any sense of a higher vision of what humanity could be, or any sense of a higher ethics. So that they become capable of acting in ways which, frankly, we can only really describe as evil, and cause massive suffering to lots of people. We saw that in the last century. We're seeing it in this. But even at a much less obvious level, a much more personal level, there doesn't need to be warfare or famine or mass hatred for life in this world to be dark. To become dark. We can lead a apparently comfortable, apparently safe, even prosperous life. But if we have no higher vision of what we could be, of what life could be, no higher values, so that all our focus is on our own wants and our own fears and our own anxieties, then we can descend into a very dark place, a place of isolation and anxiety and depression. And we see this all around us. I mean, we live in a society which is still relatively rich and free, and yet there's an epidemic of anxiety and depression. Because a life with no higher meaning can get very dark. And maybe we've lost that sense of a higher meaning. It can lead to a place we don't want to go. It can lead to a place we really do not want to be. I sometimes used to have a dream in which I was in this dream and it was just completely black. I had no idea, I was just totally surrounded by black, and it's terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying. And there are places we could be that are like that, where we don't want to go. And a life without meaning can become like that, just dark. So to stop life becoming dark, we need a higher meaning than our own wants and fears. And the best way to get that is from a higher spiritual teaching. And as far as I'm concerned, the highest spiritual teaching is the Dharma, the Buddhist Dharma. I believe that the Buddhist Dharma is the highest spiritual teaching that we can have, and that it shines a light into this world, which is where we get the title of this talk. And this series. So this light came into the world about 2,500 years ago with the enlightenment of the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama. He was lit up, if you like, by a bright light, enlightened, and then this light spread out through time and space to reach even halfway around the world 2,500 years later. So that's the theme for our next few Sangha Nights. I think there's some confusion about what we have called it, a new light or light from darkness or something to do with light and darkness. And we're going to look at how this new light came into the world with the Buddha's enlightenment and how it spread out from there. That's the topic of the next few weeks. And so to do that, we need to start, obviously, with the man who became the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama. So tradition tells us Siddhartha Gautama was born as a son of a king, had 3 palaces. I don't know why he needed 3, but he apparently had 3 palaces. He had an orchestra to entertain him, in which famously it says there were no men, which apparently was a very good thing. He was secure, respected. He could have any worldly pleasure he wanted. Without any effort, he already had the life that our society tells us is going to make us happy. The life where we can get everything we want, the life that would make us happy. But strangely, Gautama apparently was not happy because he gave it up. He gave it all up to become a wandering seeker after truth. We are told that what set this off was seeing, while he was being driven around in his chariot, seeing a sick man, an old man, so a suffering sick man, a helpless old man, and a dead body. Nice story. There's a bit more, but a nice story. It dramatizes the fact that he became aware of our shared human condition, which involves inevitable sickness, old age, and death. We all get old, we all get sick, we will all die. And in the face of those truths, just getting whatever toys and sweeties we fancy doesn't seem very worthwhile or very noble. Where's the meaning of it all? And Gautama, we told, got a glimmer, a sense of that meaning by seeing a wandering holy man who represented for him what it was possible to have, the way it was possible to live, the possibility of a higher vision, possibility of a more noble quest. So those are traditionally called the 4 sights: a sick man, an old man, a dead body, and a holy man. Sickness, old age, death, and the possibility of something that transcends those. The possibility of a life with a higher purpose that can transcend those. So there's a very good friend of mine who was quite fond of saying, he was getting on a bit like me, and I can really sympathize with this: I am turning into all 4 sights at once. It's not my joke, unfortunately. It's much quicker witted than that. Anyway, Siddhartha left his life of comfort and luxury to become a wandering seeker after the truth. Sleeping rough, begging for his food, looking for a higher meaning. He studied with 2 of the most celebrated meditation teachers of his time and mastered their techniques of meditation, but decided they weren't going to lead to enlightenment, weren't going to lead to what he wanted, liberation. Then he tried ascetic practice, or ascetic practice, as Sangha always calls it, which was apparently quite common at the time. Ascesis, from the Greek, denying the body, punishing the body. The idea seemed to be that by subjugating, punishing, conquering the body, the soul, as it were, could become free. The soul wouldn't be shackled to the body. It would rise above the body and the physical world, rise above the worldly sphere to a higher level. So to do that, people would do things like starving themselves, holding their breath, standing on top of a high pole for a very long time, sitting between 4 raging fires in the heat of India, all that sort of thing. So the Buddha tried this. We're told that he spent some time controlling his breath, holding his breath as a practice as long as he could, until he got this terrible roaring in his ears and actually fell down and people thought he was dead. So he almost killed himself holding his breath. It's a man of very strong will. He then spent some time eating nothing, absolutely nothing, but then decided he needed to eat a bit, so he would eat a very small amount each day. He became like a skeleton covered in skin. Sometimes you see images of the Buddha looking skeletal. So what he says in one of the Pali Suttas is, my limbs became like bamboo stems. My backside became like a camel's hoof. My spine stood out like a string of beads. My ribs jutted out like the jutting rafters of an old barn. The skin of my belly became stuck to my spine. So pretty horrendous. He's almost dead, really. But he eventually realized that ascetic practice wasn't leading him anywhere except an early death. And he accepted a meal of milk rice, we're told. He went back to eating normally. And we're told that around this time, he remembered an occasion from his childhood when he was sitting under a rose apple tree, when he remembered a relaxed, happy state. He remembered, in fact, dwelling in the first dhyana, the first stage of meditation, in which we're relaxed, united, our mind is united and harmonized, calm and at peace, but which we can still actually use our faculty of thinking in a sort of clarified way. And he realized that that state was much more likely to lead to seeing into the nature of reality than punishing his body, torturing himself. Which leads us to the point, at that point, when he gave up ascetic practice, the point where the Buddha actually went and took his seat under the Bodhi tree, determined to meditate to gain enlightenment. The Bodhi tree is an interesting one, isn't it? Because in some traditions, or some texts, it's said that it's a really sort of holy thing. Its roots spread down into all worlds, the depths of the world, and its branches go up into other worlds. So he sat down under this Bodhi tree, determined to break through. And what happened next is described in a mythic story, which illustrates what went on inside the Buddha, in his mind and heart, rather than being an account of what happened in the outer world. In the outer world, what we would have seen was probably a very scruffy, thin man sitting down under a tree, staying there all night, and then getting up again. But the mythic story describes the inner events, and it's much, much more interesting. So according to this, when it looked like Gautama was going to break through to awakening, to enlightenment, then the figure of Mara appeared to him. So in traditional Buddhism, Mara is described as the king of desire, the king of the realm of desire, the king of our world. And he is determined that none of his subjects are going to escape his realm. And he does everything possible to stop people making real spiritual progress. If we start making serious progress, Mara pops up. He gets worried and he pops up to knock us off our perch. When we think we've found a motorway to enlightenment, Mara sort of directs us down some exit that ends up in a muddy field. I'm afraid this is usually the way it happens. I think it's a lot of people's experience, actually, that just when we think we've cracked it, something gets in the way. We could say that Mara represents all the forces in us that are opposed to us changing, that are opposed to us breaking free, that want us to keep the same, don't want us to make spiritual progress. If we're in danger of making progress, Mara pops up. So watch out for Mara. He'll be there, especially when you think, woohoo, now it's really happening. Anyway, we're told that Mara appeared to Gautama and tried to use anything he could find in Gautama's heart, personality, mind, that could stop him breaking out of the darkness of Mara's world. So he tried to use his pride. Gautama was a member of a privileged warrior class. And Mara mocked him for becoming an impoverished, homeless beggar, a mere tramp, saying that it wasn't worthy of his status as a warrior prince, that he was a disgrace to his family. And I think that might be something we have to watch out for as well sometimes. My family expect me to be successful and wealthy, and they'll be ashamed of me if I become a mere spiritual bum. So, what would they think of me now? Oh, I better, I can't do this. I better do something more conventional. I think Mara might appear in that form to some of us as well. Anyway, this didn't work with the future Buddha. So Mara then tried to use the forces of anger and fear in the Buddha to scare him away from enlightenment. These are represented in the mythic story by what are called Mara's sons, the army of Mara's sons, the terrifying army of Mara's sons. And there are some great descriptions of Mara's sons in the tradition. There's a wonderful tradition. I'm going to read you one a bit. So Mara summoned the terrible hair-raising army of his sons. His soldiers could transform their shape and faces in a million ways. Their heads and hands were twisted and distorted, their eyes inflamed, shining red and flashing, their teeth sticking out of their mouths, their tongues lolling, thick and rough like matting. With the faces of boars, fishes, camels and asses, one-eyed, many-faced, three-headed, some with speckled bellies sticking out. Some like men crossed with goats, some with knees like swollen pots, carrying headless bodies in their arms, ghastly faces, monstrous mouths covered in red spots. Think about spots. Some leaped about wildly, others danced, some sported in the sky. Some were diseases that waste the strength, others illnesses that infatuate the mind. With raucous, ugly voices, harsh and terrifying, they roared and groaned as they charged, screaming, grab him, strike him, rip him to pieces, cut, tie, break. Throwing spears and swords, javelins and axes, poisoned darts and uprooted trees, raining down rocks and burning embers, waving their limbs and screeching with laughter. And so it goes on. They pushed and jostled as they crowded round to frighten the Buddha. But as a forest fire stops when it reaches the water, as an arrow bounces back when it hits a rock, just so the aura of the Buddha repulsed the horde of Mara's sons. So the Buddha sits as a classic image. This is going on all around him. And the Buddha sits in this bright aura of peace, unmoved, and all the weapons that are thrown at him come into his aura and turn to flowers and carpet the ground beautifully. So he's sitting in his own aura of peace, his own aura of serenity. As all this stuff rages around him, I think this is a powerful image. Well, it's a powerful image of something about the spiritually developed mind and about meditation. He sits in a bubble of peace. He sits in his own beautiful sphere of influence. And all the weapons thrown at him turn to flowers as soon as they enter his aura. This could be about external things. If we're quite developed, external things just don't bother us. We just sit in our beautiful aura, our beautiful sort of own mind, heart. But it could be about our own things as well. I'll come back to that. So Mara finds that using anger and fear doesn't work. They just bounce off. The Buddha ignores them, basically. So he tries to use desire and lust to distract the Buddha from his quest. So in the mythic story, he summons his beautiful, sexy daughters to seduce the Buddha. Some quite colourful descriptions of this as well. Again, the Buddha sits unmoved. He sits unmoved in his aura, bright aura of peace. So Mara's armies and Mara's daughters, they might be external, but they might not be. They might not be external. They exist in the mind as well. And this image of the Buddha sitting peacefully, I think, can be a good image of what we sometimes need to do in meditation, sitting peacefully surrounded by all this stuff. When we sit down to meditate, it may be that thoughts of ill will or fear or desire will come up in our mind. These can be the product of past conditions, what's called a vipaka. They're the product of past actions and conditions, so we have no choice about them. But we can choose what happens in the present and in the future. So we can, on the one hand, we can identify with these thoughts. I'm angry, I could have some of that, whatever. We can identify with those thoughts, put energy into them, give them more momentum, and then we go with them, they become part of us. Or we can stand back from them, see them as mental weather, stand in a sort of bright space, like the Buddha's aura, watching them come up and allowing them to pass, and not thinking they're me, not putting energy into them. So meditation is often not about having no thoughts. That's maybe beyond us sometimes, but it's about not taking those negative thoughts seriously and not pouring energy into them. So the Buddha is sitting unmoved in his aura of peace in the face of Mara's sons and daughters. And I think that can be a very good image to hold in mind in meditation. These thoughts will come up, angry, very seductive maybe, but I will sit in my space of light, allowing any weapons to turn into flowers, not getting up and chasing after Mara's daughters. So poor old Mara, poor guy, trying to use the Buddha's desire didn't work either. So he thinks of something else. He tries to use doubt. He tries to undermine Gautama's sense of self-worth so that he would feel that he wasn't worthy of breaking through into enlightenment. He says, "Who are you, petty princeling, to think that you are worthy of sitting on the diamond throne of the Buddhas before you?" And that might be something we need to watch out for sometimes as well. Thinking that we are not good enough to succeed at the spiritual life, not good enough to, who do I think I am to tackle the spiritual life? Who am I to think I can do this? Again, this didn't work with the future Buddha. The Buddha's rock solid confidence, faith in himself is traditionally represented by the earth touching mudra, the gesture of touching the earth, which we see in this rupa here. The Buddha reached down to touch the earth in response to Mara's challenging his right to be there. And I think that's a powerful image. It's a powerful image of groundedness, confidence, grounded in reality. It says, "Here I sit. This is who I am." And, well, this isn't very traditional interpretation, but it also seems to me that by reaching down to touch the earth in response to Mara's challenge, the Buddha is expressing his connection with the earth, with nature, with the nature of things. He is nature, in a sense, fulfilling itself. We are part of nature. The Buddha was part of nature. Our awareness is, in a sense, the universe becoming aware of itself. And when our awareness develops to the point of enlightenment, nature, the earth, will be fulfilling itself. So the Buddha expresses this by reaching down to touch the earth, saying, in a way, it's not just me sitting here as a paltry little individual. This is the process of evolution sitting here. That gave rise to me sitting here. It's the nature of things sitting here. That's what it says to me. And I've said that's not a traditional interpretation, but whether you take that or not, it's a powerful image. It's a powerful image in its own right, a powerful gesture to reach down and touch the earth when the confidence, self-worth is challenged. And it's something we can use in our meditation. If we think, well, I can't do this, whatever, maybe imagine that, or maybe do it, touching the earth. So yeah, if in doubt, unsure, can't do it, don't deserve it, imagine touching the earth, calling the earth to witness, the earth that supports us and keeps us in our existence, calling that to our aid. The very nature of things supports us in our desire to grow. Speaking poetically, it wants us to grow. So we can, in our imagination, call the earth to witness for us, get a sense of the rightness and justification of what we're doing. So the mythic story goes on that when the Buddha touched the earth goddess appears out of the earth and vouches for his practice, vouches for the fact that he's been practicing for life after life after life. Through all the ages, he does deserve it. He does deserve to sit on the diamond seat of enlightenment, this place where light comes into the world. So at this point, Mara, well, he's forced to give up. He can't do it anymore. And the Buddha begins to make his great breakthrough. So as the night progresses, the Buddha experiences wave after wave of deeper and deeper awakening. When you read the text, you don't really feel like I now know what he was experiencing. There's a few things it says, like he remembered past lives, but yeah, they don't really tell us about the content of this enlightenment because they cannot. The Buddha was always adamant, always made it very clear afterwards that what he directly experienced, what he doesn't directly experience about the nature of reality cannot be described in words or concepts, as we will see. But something great was happening, which maybe we can't understand. Well, we can't understand because we haven't experienced it. Now, there's a line in a song by Leonard Cohen, to change the subject apparently, that I like, where he says, there is a crack in everything. That's where the light gets in. So my image is that as the night goes on, the Buddha prizes this crack open more and more, until we are told, as the morning star came up over the horizon, some of you know this, the great dark was ripped apart. We usually accompany that with a great crash of cymbals. I was hoping that some people might just come in with it. The great dark was ripped apart. A great light flooded into the world, ripping the dark apart. And for now, this light just illuminated one very special being. It was internal, if you like, but luckily for us, it didn't stop there. How it spread out from there, despite being inexplicable, how it spread out from that one being through time and space, even to us, we'll explore in the next few talks, next week and the talks that follow. Anyway, going back a bit, as I've said, the Buddha always made it clear that the nature of his enlightenment, the nature of his vision of reality, his direct experience of the nature of reality could not be described in words. So how are we going to connect with it? Well, how are we going to connect with it? The teachings of the Dharma are often very logical, very reasonable, they're commonsensical even. And you might find that with our introductory classes. I remember I think she was a GP coming along to the introductory classes and saying, this should be taught in schools. This is how to live a decent, happy life. It's how to have good relationships. It's how to be a decent human being. It's how to make a positive effect on the situations you're in. It should be taught in schools. Why isn't it? It's common sense. Well, sort of. And all of that very logical, reasonable aspect it's part of it. It's an important part of it. But it's not all of it. That can all be described in words. But there is something beyond, something mysterious and deep, which, according to the Buddha, cannot be described in words or concepts. So how are we going to connect with it? Well, maybe we can get an intuitive sense, a glimmer, a taste in various different ways. Something we experience not just with the head, but with the intuitive sense, with the heart, at a deeper level with our whole being. This something mysterious and important, and I would say, I'd use the word sacred. I think there are several ways we can get that. I mean, one of the things is I don't know about you, it probably is true of a lot of us here, that I found everything to do with Buddhism, even before I'd come across a Buddhist, fascinating. It's as though something of that light sort of clung like a glow around the whole tradition. So that anything to do with Buddhism was just fascinating. I think that could be true of books. I mean, we studied the Dharma, but it's not just about the content somehow. I held the Dharma book in my hand and just thought, there's something really important about this, maybe that I don't even understand. And people have come to me and said, this is a wonderful book. And I've known they didn't understand it, but it's just got this real significance for them. It's as though there's this light adhering to things, which gives them this fascination. So learning the Dharma is not just about facts. It's about absorbing a feeling, an approach to life, a way of looking at things that includes a sense of mystery and reverence even, a deep beauty. Books, images can carry a power. I mean, I've known people who just saw an image of the Buddha and that was it. Boof. Images can carry a real power. They can carry a meaning that we can't quite define and a feeling that we can't necessarily put our finger on, and just an idea of the way we've got to live. So images can be very, very powerful way of expressing this something. People. I remember when I first really got myself deeply involved in the Dharma, coming across people who I thought, well, I've just never met anyone like this before. I've never met anyone like this before in my life. They're just dancing to a different drummer. They're just totally different, and they're big. They're bigger than the people I've met before. Yeah, I mean, I can't, how could you say it? But it's something about, I want a bit of that. I want a bit of that. Sangha is fond of saying the Dharma is caught, not taught. So we catch some of this light that has come down, maybe from people. I want a bit of that. And then one that I'd like to focus on is meditation. Meditation can sometimes be seen as a sort of standalone practice and you don't have to do anything else in the West. Well, that's not going to work. We need to study the Dharma, to know the Dharma, and we need connection with people who are committed to practice and have been practicing for a while. But for most of us, I think the way we get the strongest glimmer of experience of that something, that light, that entered the world through the Buddha's enlightenment is going to be in meditation. So the place that the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree, when he broke through to enlightenment, the place that all the Buddhas sit, apparently, is traditionally called the Vajrasana, the diamond seat or the diamond throne. Diamonds, of course, are immensely hard, indestructible in a way, and full of light. If you look into a diamond, there's clarity and light. It's also Vajrasana. It's also a thunderbolt, for heaven's sakes. It's a Vajra. So yeah, I mean, the brightness shining in, a flash of lightning, poof, into the world. So the Vajrasana is the place where the light from somewhere beyond the world shone through to our world, into the Buddha. It's a place of power. It's said to be the very center of the world. It's the place from which the light of the Buddha's enlightenment could shine out through time and space. In some traditions, we're told to see every meditation seat, every cushion or stool or chair on which we meditate, as connected through time and space back to the diamond throne of the Buddha. In some traditions, before and after meditation, I gather, the meditator bows to their seat. Bows to their seat because their seat is a fragment of the diamond throne, and that's where the light's coming from. So every time we meditate, some of the light from the diamond seat can shine into us. And I find this a really powerful image and a powerful practice, which stops meditation being a mere psychological or emotional exercise and makes it a sacred act, an act that connects us to the sacred, to something totally beyond it. We can't, well, I use the word sacred. What does it mean? But something that's not just ordinary. And maybe you could try it this week as a sort of homework. You might not want to, whether you do or not. Can I just encourage you to meditate a bit more than usual as your homework, okay? If you don't meditate, then do. And if you do meditate, then maybe meditate a little bit more. But you could also try bringing this image to mind, thinking, this seat on which I'm about to meditate is connected to the diamond throne of the Buddha through time and space. And some of the light of the Buddha's enlightenment can come through it to me. There's something magical about it. And in taking this attitude, it's a great help to do everything that we can to make meditation special. Make meditation a sacred act, not a mere little psychological exercise. Do it with a devotional attitude. Make the place we meditate special. Have a shrine. If you don't have a shrine, build a shrine. Make a shrine. If you do have a shrine, beautify your shrine. Do not sit among the dirty socks. Very difficult to have a sacred act sitting among the dirty socks. Surround meditation with appropriate ritual, bowing to the shrine, maybe lighting candles, maybe making an offering of incense or something else. Call the Buddha to mind and open up to that idea that the seat on which we're sitting is connected through time and space to the diamond throne of the Buddhas. It's a place where the light that came into the world at the Buddha's enlightenment can shine into even us, lighting up our hearts and our minds. Thank you.